Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello, this is Matthew Shipp from Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, and I'm here today with Jackie Huebbe from SugarBot Sweet Shop and SugarBot Creamery. And we're probably, since we're beverages, going to chat a little bit more about the creamery. But how are you doing today, Jackie?
Doing all right.
Great. So I'm really curious, how did, the Sweet Shop started first, is that right?
Yes.
And how did that come to pass? How did you find yourself here?
Yeah. So the Sweet Shop side started in technically 2012 is when we became like real and legal. But before that, it had always been something that I was really interested in, something that I always wanted to do. Both of my folks are blue collar. So my dad was a construction superintendent and my mom was a welder before they both retired. They were very much like, don't do it. You don't want a job where you have to stand. You don't want a job that, is going to weigh on your body all the time. Like, get a desk job, do something easy, be in air conditioning all the time, like, go for it. And I was a terrible teenager and I listened. And so I did like the opposite of what you hear every other teenager doing. And so I listened and I went to school for graphic design and marketing and I worked in that for about 10 years and I hated damn near every day of it. I liked the work that I was doing, but I never found somewhere that I felt like I really fit completely. Like I was always not showing 100% of myself. And so it got to the point where I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And I would go to work during the day and then I would come home and bake at night because that was what I really wanted to be doing. And at the time it was just me and my dogs. And so we'd hang out in the kitchen and I'd bake stuff and test things. And then I'd bring it into work and share it with a couple coworkers that I had a bond with. And from there, it kind of spun into a little bit of an underground pastry ring from my cubicle. And then kind of shortly after that, my boss, the best boss that I've ever had, her name is Mandy, and I'm still in touch with her. She kind of pulled me aside and was like, it's really clear that this isn't where you want to be. You're doing an awesome job. Everything here is great. But like, if you want to make a plan to phase yourself out, like, let's talk about it. And so she was amazing in helping me figure out how to get those pieces to work and how to line it all up. And so she helped me escape the corporate world.
That is a great boss. Ones I can notice that.
Yes.
So
she is amazing.
An underground pastry ring. So what did that look like? Just curious. And how did that help establish? So
it did. Initially, it was just me kind of making things that I wanted to make, kind of figuring out recipes. I would, in exchange, if people wanted a treat, I was like, you've got to fill out this feedback card. This is the thing that I need. Because it was
feedback
all,
cards?
Yes, there were feedback cards. So because it was all, like, would you buy this? How much would you pay for this? How much do you think other people would pay for this? Like, could you tell what the flavor was? Because a lot of it was, I'm not telling you what's in it. You can tell me if you're allergic to peanuts or if you're whatever, and then I'll tell you if you can't have what I've made. But a lot of it was just like, try this thing and tell me what you think it is.
Now, were you doing this just out of curiosity, or were you doing this in hopes of like testing out the idea of starting your own business?
So initially, I was just doing it out of curiosity. I'm such a weird numbers, like Excel spreadsheet weirdo that like even before I thought that it was going to be feasible for me to make the jump, that was what I went for. But then kind of as I started to see it, I was like, okay, I think that this is realistic, because when I was doing it, this was 2005 to 2006, 2007. I guess it probably went all the way to 2009, because that was when I officially left corporate world, was 2009. Initially, when I was doing this, there was not anything like what I'm doing. Those things did not exist anywhere.
And when you say these things, are you talking about the way the bakery. What was different about this bakery?
Yeah. At the time, all of the bakeries were donut shops or they were cupcake shops. Those were the only two kinds of bakeries, or they were like big box grocery store bakeries. Oh, there used to be one in Kirkwood and then it sold and it's not good anymore. I'm not going to say the name because I just said that it's not good anymore, but it like sold to some massive company. But it was more still very donut based, very much. It looked like the bakery department of a grocery store. So it wasn't niche. It didn't have a very specific calling to it. That was it. And so that was kind of what I was trying to see was like, is that even viable? And then the year that everything hit for me when I started to build out the storefront, started to work on that stuff, was the year that like all of these other little bakeries started popping up. And I was like, this is awesome because it was showing me that it is viable.
You were on the right track.
That I was on the right track. And so I felt like I didn't have that same feeling where people are like, oh, that was my idea. I looked at it and was like, yes, this is great. If other people have the same idea, that validates what I'm doing.
Did you find that there was enough of the pie to go around?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I mean, there's a couple bakeries that I'm really like that have been around. They opened their storefronts before I opened mine. And I think the world of the women that run them. And I think it's really great. Patisserie Choquette. Simone is amazing. She's the nicest, most hilarious. Like, I love her. And we are also both House Slytherin. So I feel like we have that bonding.
Great. Yes.
I hope that I didn't just out her. I don't know that she wants to be outed in the world as what she is, but here we are. And Kaylin that runs Whisk down off Cherokee Street. So they're both in the city, but they're both doing the same. It's nothing like what I'm doing. And, you know, what Simone does is different than what Kaylin does. And what Kaylin does is different. You know, we're all three very different, but it is that same idea. You're walking in, everything is made from scratch. Everything has its calling. And it's not like a grocery store selection of items.
So I guess if you outed one in their house, you got to out the other. Or which house they're in.
Kaylin. Oh my God. I have no idea what house Kaylin would be in.
Wow.
And also this is where I also come as a bit of a poser. I don't know if people use the word poser anymore, but I have listened to the Harry Potter audiobooks. I listened with one of my employees, actually. We spent a couple weeks listening to all of the audiobooks for all of her shifts. You know, I did it because she was very like passionate and she loved it. And I love reading and I love books. And so, you know, we kind of went with it that way. But I would definitely not call myself a super fan.
Okay.
But I'm going to say, Kaylin, I'm going to say she's probably Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff, all right.
Because she's just like the nicest.
All right. So while we're getting into names and names of houses, what's in the name of SugarBot and how do you come about that?
Yeah, so SugarBot just kind of came from my love of robots, my love of sugar. It was my nickname whenever I worked at a catering company. And the whole deal in food service is folks typically don't stay around for a really long time. And so people would always joke like, oh, we're not learning your name until you've been here for like months. And then we'll bother figuring out your name. And so for the longest time, I was SugarBot. And then I was like, honestly, I've never liked my name. So I was just like, we can just stick with that. Like, don't even bother. And people are like, no, like, what's really your name? It's SugarBot. That's just, I don't know.
So fascination with robots.
Yeah.
What can you tell me more about that?
I think, you know, kind of the short story that I always tell people is that my dad really wanted a boy and he got stuck with me. But I have always really loved, you know, all of like the traditional. Now, thankfully, that vibe is changing and there's not like the traditional boy toy versus girl toy situation. But I've always loved like Hot Wheels and Ninja Turtles and, you know, I've climbing trees and going sledding and just doing like I was always the most adventurous kid.
That's awesome.
Coming up with like, what happens if we climb this tree and then get onto the roof of our house and then try to take the sled off of it? Like, what could possibly go wrong? How many staples did you have in your head? Well,
since we're talking about small businesses, then, do you think that played into that risk factor, your high risk factor played into like taking a chance at this?
I think so, but for me, it's always been calculated risks. Like, even as a kid, I definitely remember really knowing, like, you know, the whole joke is what could go wrong, but like really having a solid understanding of what actually really could go wrong. And so that was a lot of, you know, like, you don't get on the sled to take it off the roof until you put the smaller kid on the sled, see what happens with them, you know, or like you put the life-size like He-Man doll on the sled and then let that go down and see what happens.
Okay.
So, you know, you
experiment.
You do the baby steps and you figure out, like, at what level is the maiming going to be too far gone?
I definitely identify with the testing first for a certain time to see what's going on. So that's definitely in my wheelhouse. Also, just for the listener, if you walk into the sweet shop and the SugarBot, you will find old antique robots from all different eras, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, I think 30s to late 60s.
Wow. All right. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. So it definitely matches the theme. Also, like I said, walking into here, what we're going to hear is, since we're about beverages, I want to talk about, you started another extension to SugarBot, and that's the creamery.
Yes.
So what inspired you to start the creamery?
When I started the business, the bakery, officially the first storefront was in Webster Groves, and then we moved to St. Charles in 2015. And then by about 2016, it was pretty clear that I had outgrown this space, which was wild because this is like twice the size of what the shop was in Webster. And so, you know, moving here, I was like, oh, it's so huge. We're never going to outgrow it. And it didn't take very long at all for me to be like, I've made a grave mistake and we own this building. So I started looking for other places. And initially my thought was doing more of like a commissary kitchen situation. So making some of the things off site and then kind of having them brought in and then doing a lot of the finish work and stuff here. And then I had found out about a business that was then called Little O's that was for sale. And the first time it was for sale was 2016. And I had reached out. I was interested in it. And the original owners, there was a lot going on. And it was clear that they were just not in any place to have anything together to sell. And then the second owners bought it, and I was kind of like, oh man, like that sucks. I wanted that business. And then they barely made it a year, and then it was up for sale again. And so then when it was up for sale, I was like, I want it. Like, this is a thing that I want. I grew up in Herman, Missouri, and my grandpa had a pharmacy and soda fountain there. And when I came out to St. Charles initially, a bunch of people that had known, you know, kind of my family history and that sort of stuff were like, oh, got to check out Little O's. And when I had gone in back in 2015, I went in and I was like, this isn't a soda shop. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. Like, it was all wrong. And it frustrated me to no end that it was all wrong. And so I kind of had this, like, I want to buy it to fix it, but I also want to buy it because then I've got kitchen space. And so it was going to be kind of a dual purpose. So fell through the first time. The second time, it took a really long time and it was a lot of struggle and a lot of just frustration, but it ended up going through. And it gave me the opportunity to just rip everything down and make it accurate and make it a real soda fountain. And then I hadn't really thought too much about ice cream. You know, my grandpa's shop had ice cream. It wasn't, you know, it was Missouri Valley Dairy. So it was premium for the time, but kind of in comparison. And the folks, when they had Little O's, it was just like bottom barrel, you know, nothing great as far as the ice cream goes. They were kind of trading more on like the faux nostalgia situation. And so then initially I was like, okay, well, we have to have premium ice cream. You know, if we're going to do it, I'm not trying to half-ass anything. And so then we'd hired a guy to make ice cream for us for a little while, and he wasn't willing to make the same quality that we wanted. because, we spent so much time building up the SugarBot name and building up our quality, and I wanted our sister shop to match us in quality. So we actually ended up just deciding to buy all the equipment and start making the ice cream from scratch in-house. And so then the kitchen was filled with like the batch freezer that churns the ice cream and all this other stuff. And so I never did get that extra kitchen space.
You're still working with the space you have here.
So I was still working with the space that I had here. And then in 2019, we had outgrown the Little O's space, and I had wanted to rebrand it and kind of drop the Little O's name and make it Sugar Bot Creamery. We ended up finding a building in early 2020. I looked at a lot of spaces, and I had a lot of spaces fall through to move Little O's to. And then we ended up finding another building on Historic Main that was just over 8,000 square feet. And I was like, this is perfect. So we bought it. We renovated it. So now I have a massive kitchen down there, and I have like all the space that I could possibly want. And I'm hoping it lasts me more than like 2 years.
And for a listener, Historic Main is an area in downtown St. Charles, Missouri that has a very old historic face, brick roads, very unique attraction. So this is what she's speaking of when she says Historic Main. What makes a great soda shop? Since you saw this one and it just infuriated you, what does it take to make a great soda shop?
So, I mean, it would be hand mixing the sodas. So for us, our sodas, we call them phosphates, which is the original old style. Little O's, when we took it over, they were using like a soda gun that you can find at like any bar or pub anywhere. Nothing was being hand mixed. You could add a pump of flavor to it if you wanted to, but I mean, it just wasn't right. It was all wrong. They weren't using the phosphoric acid, which is like key to having a phosphate. We reeled it back. I drove an hour past Indianapolis, Indiana to buy an actual historic functioning soda fountain. It needed a little bit of work, so had to kind of replace some parts and weld some stuff together and kind of get that going. Some of the old soda fountains they used, I forget what the metal was, but it's not a metal that you want coming into contact with food anymore. So we went through and removed all those parts and, replaced it with the new grade of everything that it needs to be for food safety, and got it all up and running and replumbed it. And so now we have like the actual carbonated water that we make there. We've got the carbonator that runs through and puts all the pressure and everything into the water. So that's awesome. And the old jerk, the soda jerk, you pull the little lever and jerk it forward or jerk it backward, depending on how much pressure you're wanting to give into the cup, and mixes all your flavors together. It's awesome.
So that explains why you call the staff there the soda jerks.
Yes.
Okay, now I know.
Yes.
And now
Yeah,
hopefully a lot
jerks.
of people just learned that today. So that's great. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced getting all of this started up, whether it was a creamery or the sweet shop, and what were those early challenges and how did you overcome them?
The two biggest challenges, I think, for everybody are always time and money. You always have the idea, but it's figuring out the time, it's figuring out how you're going to pay for it. So, I met with so many banks to figure out what it would be to take out the loan to either buy one of the businesses or buy one of the buildings or kind of run through any of that. But aside from kind of those two very standard answers, I think the biggest, hardest part has been sourcing ingredients that meet the quality that I want them to be.
What would you say right now is your current biggest challenge you're having?
Ooh, I guess I'm going to say equipment. It would probably be the biggest. So like I mentioned, we've got this huge, beautiful kitchen. It is just massive. The kitchen at the creamery is the entire footprint of our bakery location and the entire footprint of the original Little O's. You put them together and the kitchen is still bigger than that. So it's massive. Finding equipment that is reasonably priced and usable has been almost impossible. So we're still working on kind of building out the kitchen there and getting that stuff to the point where, it's fully workable. And then we've got some bigger pieces of equipment that I'm looking at to be able to do like nationwide shipping for like gooey butter cakes and baked goods and that kind of thing. So
but that doesn't happen until the equipment's in?
Right.
Okay. And the logistics behind the equipment is you're just not finding it, right?
Yeah, not finding. So much of it now post-COVID has all just been inflated, and it's like, they're selling equipment that is just bottom barrel. It's really poorly made for way more than new equipment would have been just a couple years ago.
Wow.
And so it's really just finding that balance of like what we can afford, when the time is right, what do we have space for? We're kind of just waiting for it to all fall into place, because typically how I've operated almost exclusively other than purchasing businesses or buildings is that I've always paid cash for everything. So it's one of those situations where, if we don't have the $10,000 to buy a new mixer, we don't buy the new mixer until we do.
Probably a very good practice to have.
It's worked out really well for us. It just takes a little longer to get things sometimes.
Yeah, I imagine. Getting into the heart of the show here on Harvest to Pour. Now, yours is more sourcing to pour.
Yes.
And you did mention sourcing really good ingredients is hard to come by. Can you go more into that? Why it's so difficult?
Yeah. So I think kind of part of why it's so difficult is that no one that I have found, and I have looked and looked and looked, no one is doing what we're doing. So, there's maybe 4, 5 actual soda shops, soda fountains left in the country. There's not very many of them. And they are all doing the same thing that the original O's was doing. Like, nobody is really hand mixing drinks. Nobody's, making a lot of what they're actually using. And so for us, trying to find flavorings that are all natural, that don't have artificial flavors, that don't have artificial colors, it's extremely difficult. And you'll find some lines where they'll do it and it's great, but it's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of figuring out, does it work? And then some of it also is overcoming the client expectations, because everyone is so used to grape, fake grape, Laffy Taffy grape. And then you bring something in that's actual grape and people are like, ugh. And you're like, it tastes like a grape. So kind of starting to match those things up.
How does your customer base react? That was that first reaction to grape, for example, but are you finding you have to do more education? How are you going about doing that? So,
the cool thing is that we have a lot of our clients are older folks that remember the original soda fountain. And so for them, when they come in and taste the things that we're making, they're like, oh, this is it. This tastes like childhood. This is how it should taste. And so a lot of them have been like our most passionate advocates, where they're coming in and they're explaining to their grandkids or their kids or, nieces and nephews or whatever, this is how it was. This is legit. And so that's been really cool to have people kind of help us spread that. And then now, thankfully, so many folks are moving toward no high fructose corn syrup. No, they're moving away from a lot of that unnatural stuff. It's cool because we can say, like, you can look at the labels of everything that we have, all of our core ingredients. And now there's going to be things like a peanut butter cup ice cream that's got Reese's peanut butter cups in it. That's just what it's going to be. If the Reese's peanut butter cup speaks to you, you're already eating that. But as far as like one of our most popular ice cream flavors that we have is mint avalanche. And the mint that we use in it is actual mint, and we mix it into our chocolate ice cream. So it has this, we call it like a swampy looking color, because it's the natural green of mint mixed with chocolate. And it's a strange color, but when you have it, you're like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
And so kind of just making sure that people understand our strawberry ice cream is a paler pink. It's not going to be like day glow traffic cone pink like what you're seeing.
What
and
not to look for.
Yes. And it's because we're using actual pureed strawberries in it. that's what's happening. Yeah, it's neat to be able to say, like, this is the deal.
So you said it was hard to source some pieces. You have the original soda fountain. Was it phosphoric acids?
Phosphoric acid.
Phosphoric acids, and I'm sure those are hard to come by. Now, you're not trying to completely duplicate an old soda fountain. I'm sure. How do you make it uniquely yours? How do you make it uniquely SugarBot?
Yeah, so, I mean, for us, a lot of the stuff is just people's palates have changed. The flavors of things that people are looking for have changed. So some of it are combinations that you probably wouldn't have historically found. Pomegranate is a really popular one. Hazelnut is another really popular one. So we're doing a lot of that, but we're not going off the deep end as far as like the trends and that kind of thing. It's rare. I mean, our Monster Milkshake, which we can kind of talk about later, the Main Street Monster is one where we've sort of broken that tradition. But like, you will never see lavender anywhere in our shop. You won't see like rose, or I don't want any of that anywhere near my business.
Yeah, any flavors that you can associate easily with soap, I could see that.
Well, with soap, or even with, do people still say hipsters?
I guess
like,
so, sure.
You know, the hipsters are like these kind of like just bougie trends. That's not the stuff that I'm looking for, you know, but you'll see a lot of these bigger ice cream shops that are getting huge followings like Jenny's and those bigger places. You'll see that they do have like a lavender or whatever. That's not our game.
Okay.
I don't want that.
That makes sense. No, it's great. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. So if you could take me through when you source these materials and you apply your own creativity to them, and now you're also taking into consideration these new palettes. How are you sure that this is what the customer is going to like?
So, I mean, I have guessed wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely times where I'm like, I think that this thing is absolutely amazing, and it doesn't sell nearly as well as I think that it's going to. Our employees actually laugh at me because there are some things that my husband and we are so attached to, like, I don't understand. This is freaking delicious. Why have people not caught on? And so still, whenever we're getting ready to do the fall swap over for ice cream flavors, and I'm like, oh man, we made a cookie butter ice cream and it was frigging delicious and nobody wanted it. I'm pretty sure that Mark, my husband, and I ate like all 9 gallons of it.
Oh, well.
And I don't understand. It was so good. And the people weren't ready.
So speaking of team, you brought up your team, your soda jerks. How would this team play into the success of the creamery?
So our team is 100% of the success as far as I'm concerned. You can have amazing recipes, you can have an amazing business, but if the people that are slinging your product aren't good, there's no point. You know, people aren't going to come back. And so we've been so lucky to have such a good team. We just had one of our long-term employees just left for college. So we had a new employee for the first time in like a year start. They're loving it. They're doing an awesome job. But I mean, the majority of the folks that have been with us on average, probably 2.5 years. So, I mean, when our staff comes, they tend to stay. And if they're not going to make it, it'll be like within a week, we'll know that, that they're not going to make it. It's pretty clear right away.
All right. So you've definitely broken that turn of the expectation of food services having that high turnover.
Yes.
So you're actually, so what do you believe that you're doing differently? Because I'm sure there are plenty of people that are small business owners within this food and beverage that would want to hear the trick.
I mean, it's not a trick. It's like, to me, it's so simple. Is just meet people where they're at, give people an opportunity. Don't judge, the whole don't judge a book by its cover situation. We pay well. Our team they're treated well. They can request off. They've got flexible schedules. I'm really committed to working with people. But another thing that we have done that has been awesome for us, we have started to employ folks that are not always easily employable. So the majority, actually, as of right now, 100% of our staff falls into a couple categories. So we do a lot of justice involved workforce. So we've got staff that have felony convictions in their background. We've got a lot of LGBTQIA staff. And then we have a lot of staff that are somewhere on a mental health spectrum, of one or another. And I have found that pretty much everyone that comes to us from those backgrounds interviews and interviews and interviews, and no one is willing to meet them halfway because of how they look or things that they've done in their past and that kind of thing. And for me, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be judged for something that I've done 20 years ago or a decision that I've made. And then some things are just out of your control. And unfortunately, where we are here in St. Charles is we're not there yet, as far as accepting people and giving people opportunities and seeing people for really who they are and everybody's value. So that's huge for us, is that I don't care about, I care about your background, but that doesn't matter to me. You don't have to lead with that stuff. Share when you're ready to share. But so a lot of it has really just become kind of word of mouth, employees referring other employees. We've had some employees, when it's their time to leave and go to school, they're like, oh, but my younger sibling is looking for a job and they see how I've been treated here, or my best friend's younger sibling, is going through a hard time. I think that they would really feel welcome here. And so it's been really cool to see the staff, like when they are leaving, like 99% of them actually work to replace themselves, which is awesome.
That's a great trend. And no matter what diverse background or background they come from, that they're actually trying to find ways to replace themselves because they feel that they want to pay it back to you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not something that I ever expect. And the first couple times I was like, I'm sorry, you what? Like, what's going on? And I just couldn't, I don't know. I couldn't grasp it. But now seeing it happen it's really cool. And it's super cool to see that our employees, even our newest employee is already hey, when we've got another space open, I've got somebody that I think is going to be a really good fit. And it's neat to see that they respect us enough to share in their friendships and want to bring those things in. But also, it's really cool to know that they care about their friends and they're like, you're in a bad work situation right now. It would be safer for you here. It would be better for you here. So it's really super cool to see that.
I was going to ask what's your team best at, but I think you kind of answered that.
They're just best at being the best. I regularly say that we've got the nicest jerks in town, and I'm like, it's 100% true.
The nicest jerks in town.
It's the best tagline we could ask for.
All right. So where do you want to take SugarBot, whether it be the sweet shop or the creamery, next?
I think my employees are kind of tired of hearing me say that. I'm like, the next thing that I want to do is just get it to the point where my ideal situation for the team is for everybody to be making more than $20 per hour. I want to pay people, and I'm sure by the time we get there, it's going to be that's not enough. Now everybody needs to make $25 an hour. Just really working toward making sure that everybody, I want people to get their paycheck and be like, I cannot believe that I am being paid this much for the work that I do. So, that's the biggest thing. And so really, I've been working with everybody, trying to get them to spread the word, try to make sure that we're getting good reviews online. If you see something that's going wrong or you've got a question about how we're doing something, I love it when they come to me and they're like, hey, I've noticed that this thing is going a little wonky. What if we did? And so that has been cool. We did a session with you that has very much helped that, just to really get people thinking, because I try to be as transparent as possible. As far as these kids see on a Saturday, they'll be, oh man, we killed it on Saturday. We made so much money. And I'm like, okay, cool. We did. But now let's look at what it cost us to have that Saturday happen. So really making sure that they understand this is what it costs to make that happen. And I think the biggest thing that has really blown a lot of, especially actually even our adults that have worked for us, is them realizing, okay, let's say you make $16 an hour. well, it costs us $20 an hour to pay you $16 an hour because we've got all of your federal taxes and there's some of it is coming out of you, but then like we've got payroll insurance, we have the fee to run payroll, we have the fee to get the checks cut. So really making sure that they understand. You may see that it looks like we've got $2,000 in profit on a Saturday, and it's like it's nowhere even close to that when you're looking at what our mortgage costs. I mean, our utilities, especially with the way that the summer has been, like our utilities are more than our mortgage. And so it's like looking at that and being like, holy cow, we've got to have 2 Saturdays just to pay for our friggin' electricity and our mortgage. And so really making sure that they're kind of understanding that, I think has been huge. Just because, you know, if you don't see it, it's hard to really understand what's happening.
You're also teaching them some very valuable life lessons because most of these are, well, kids, 20 years and stuff. So you're just being able to see that and what the reality of it is going to help them much further down the road.
Yes.
All right.
We hope so, at least.
We hope so.
We got a lot of really, really smart kids that are working for us, though. They're catching on pretty fast.
All right. If somebody wants to start something like this, and you said there's some others, what advice would you have for them?
Hire employees right away.
All right. You can go into that?
Specifically with the bakery side of things, I'm really involved in the bakery community and the home baker community. I go to a lot of conferences. I teach a lot of classes on that kind of stuff. And so many people think, okay, I'm going to do this from home. I'm going to build it up. I'm going to move to a storefront and I'm going to keep being just me. And you can't. It is, I mean, you'll run yourself ragged trying to do that. Again, kind of with me being like that strangely organizational person. When I went to start the bakery, I wrote out like every single thing that I do. And every single thing that I thought I would do when I moved to a storefront. And then I started in my head to make positions. So you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, you know, at the beginning I'm doing everything, but you're thinking, okay, so what would like an entry level position be? What could anybody walking off the street and be able to do? And very quickly I learned that what my opinion of what anybody could walk in off the street and do is actually inaccurate. But what could you teach someone to do pretty quickly? Cleaning, washing dishes. If you get somebody that, you know, a little more willing to kind of do some math and do a little bit of thinking, they can start to weigh out ingredients. You can get folks that can crack eggs. So then great. You've got your entry level like dishwasher bakery assistant position. And that's, you know, going to be your 15 and 16-year-old kid. We had a lot of homeschool kids in that position. Those are the things that they're doing. Okay, great. All right, then maybe what's bakery assistant 2 look like? All right, they're maybe helping with inventory. Maybe they're able to refill the bins. They're able to do some simple recipes. They're able to scale out more ingredients, get some of that kind of stuff like mise en place. Awesome. Okay, so then maybe bakery level assistant 3, they're the ones now, they're touching the mixers. They're able to mix things together. They're able to touch the ovens. You're not worried about them burning themselves. Because, I mean, a bakery is a dangerous place. So just thinking about, like, what does that look like? What does it look like for a counter person? And for us, we've never had a dedicated counter person. It's always been me. And that's just because the walk-in traffic, it just isn't, so much of it that is coming in is custom orders and that kind of thing. And those are things that I'm still the one that I'm doing those. And so kind of as I've grown, it has been more figuring out what do I want to hold on to and what do I want to get rid of.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, you're saying I worked with you, but I worked with some other people in a very similar system where they had to decide, how do I shed my hats? And I think you've nailed it really well. I asked them, what does that person do? What does that person discuss? What does that person decide? And it helps you actually write your position. So
yes.
Yeah, very good. I like that. Finally, we're getting to the last couple questions here, and the hardest one of all.
Ooh.
What is your favorite beverage here at the creamery?
well, that changes. Like, I feel like my favorite thing is always the thing that like I've just worked to perfect. And so I'm always sort of chasing like the next thing that I want to come up with.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the thing that I most consistently get would probably be the Purple Cow. So that's going to be grape soda with a vanilla ice cream.
Ooh.
So it's a phosphate float.
It's a phosphate float. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Purple Cow that tends to be my go-to.
All right. And do you have anything coming up, any events or promotions or anything you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, Historic St. Charles. You mentioned a little bit. We're kind of here in closest to St. Louis, Missouri. Plug for the state's original capital. But so we have a lot of festivals and cool stuff that goes on down here. And so October, it's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th weekend, I believe, is Legends and Lanterns, which is my favorite festival of the year, and that's all Halloween oriented. For those that haven't seen me, I'm covered in tattoos of pumpkins and skeletons. So it is
Bats.
And bats. Yes, and bats. So yeah, it's kind of always Halloween in my heart. So that's going to be my favorite. But then after that, in November and December, we've got Christmas traditions, and then January is the ice carving festival, and then we've got a little bit of a lull until summer. So we're ramping up for the wild times here.
So for the Legends and Lanterns, is that where the Monster Shake makes its debut?
No. So the Monster Shake is all year long.
Oh.
We call it the Main Street Monster, and that it changes every single month. And so it's kind of just like the over-the-top milkshake. Every month we try to have a different theme. We try to use one of our ice creams that's more seasonal, or we'll try to time it with like back to school or Halloween or whatever. So yeah, those guys just, it changes, and I wish that I could even say we've got a change of a month coming in 7 days, and I honestly don't think that I could tell you even what that shake would be. We tend to cut it close because I just don't ever want to miss an opportunity. So I try not to set anything in stone until I really have to.
All right.
Because there could always be a better idea.
Well, I encourage everyone to come out and see what the next Monster Shake is. Do you know what the current one is?
Yes.
Yes.
It is So Long Summer, and it's strawberry and lemon. It's real good.
Cool. All right. I'll try that out sometime.
Yeah, that one I delegated out, so I actually didn't make it, so I had to really think about what was going on. But yeah, lemon and strawberry.
All right. And where else can we find you? You have 2 locations. Where can we find you?
Yes. SugarBot Sweet Shop is our bakery location. We are open for walk-ins there Fridays and Saturdays. And we are at Jackson and 5th Street, so 433 Jackson. If you're familiar with St. Charles, we're a block south of the hospital on 5th, same side of the street. And then the creamery location is down on Main. It's 302 North Main Street, and we are open there Wednesdays through Sundays.
All right. Well, Jackie, thanks a ton for your time. There was a lot of great information in here, a lot of lessons to learn, a lot of lessons learned. So
many
again,
lessons learned, and yet so many more.
So many more
to learn.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time, and everybody come out and check out SugarBot, Sweet Shop, and Creamery.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information. And connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.